We are getting some breaking news in the investigation into the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie.
There are some puzzling new developments tonight in the ongoing search for Nancy Guthrie.
Long before anyone realized something was terribly wrong inside the house, investigators were already focused on what happened outside it. On February 1st, 2026, in Tucson, Arizona's Catalina Foothills, an 84-year-old woman vanished from the home where she had lived for years. There was no shattered glass, no damaged door, no obvious struggle. Just an eerie stillness that instantly raised more questions than answers. What made the case even more gripping was the identity of the last person known to have seen her alive, her own son-in-law. That fact alone was enough to draw intense scrutiny. But as search crews combed the desert, helicopters swept across the landscape, and worried relatives pleaded publicly for answers, his quiet demeanor became impossible to overlook. He did not step forward in the emotional, high-profile way many people expect in a disappearance this close to home. Investigators knew silence alone was not proof of guilt, but in missing person cases, behavior often becomes part of the story. So they returned to the timeline and focused only on what could be confirmed. Nancy had spent the evening at her daughter's house during what appeared to be a completely ordinary visit. There were no reported arguments, no visible signs of tension, and nothing to suggest the night would end in mystery.
It has been 3 months since Nancy Guthrie was last seen by her family in Tucson.
The Guthrie family still left without answers about what happened to their mother. Surveillance footage shows an armed masked man tampering with her doorbell camera in the early hours of February 1st. In the last month, there have been no significant leads, and Savannah Guthrie has returned to the Today Show.
Tonight
I know this channel has been quiet, and I know you've been sitting with this case, turning it over from every direction while I was gone, but I wasn't going to come back just to give you another recap. I was waiting for the piece that finally gives the whole story a starting point. The piece that answers the question this case has circled for 3 months: why? This week, a claim emerged that, if it holds up, shifts everything. According to a report from Hiden Times, Annie Guthrie went to her mother asking for money not long before Nancy vanished from her home on February 1st. Nancy allegedly said no. That claim hasn't been confirmed by law enforcement. No one in the family has addressed it. It hasn't been denied either. But it dropped into a case already packed with unanswered financial questions: the property values, the power of attorney, the boxes leaving Nancy's house, the vehicle that sat in police custody for 40 days. And for the first time, those questions have something that might explain where they came from. This video is about the money trail, not rumors. The documented financial thread woven through property records, legal filings, law enforcement decisions, and one conversation between a mother and her daughter that may have set everything in motion. For 3 months, I've shown you how this happened. The 3 weekends of what looked like surveillance. The flower pots repositioned at night by someone who clearly knew that patio. The cameras that stopped recording. A security gate that can't be opened from outside. Medication left sitting on the counter. Ransom notes filled with details only someone who had been in that home during the crime would know. Every video on this channel has answered a part of the how asterisk. But the asterisk why, the reason someone would run that level of operation against a woman in her 80s while she was asleep, that's been out of reach. Until now. So let's walk through the financial picture, documented details, in order, because once you line them up they stop looking like coincidence. Nancy's home in the Catalina Foothills is public record, valued at roughly $1 million. It sits in one of the most sought-after neighborhoods in the Tucson area. She'd lived there for decades. Annie and Tommaso's home is about 4 miles away. Estimated value, around $650,000. That's a gap of roughly $350,000 between what the mother owned and what the daughter who lived closest to her owned. On its own, that gap is unremarkable. Parents frequently have more than their children. That's life. But when you're trying to understand why someone would target this specific woman, in this specific house, with this specific level of planning, what she owned matters. Because the most common motive when an elderly person is harmed by someone in their own circle isn't rage, and it isn't revenge. It's access to assets that only become reachable when the owner is no longer around to protect them. Then there's the power of attorney. An unverified document circulated online shows that in May of 2025, 8 months before Nancy disappeared, Tommaso signed a durable power of attorney nomming Annie as his agent over financial and property matters. People with legal backgrounds looked at it and said this is standard, the kind of paperwork that gets handled during a refinance or a property transfer. Someone in the comments explained it was almost certainly tied to a loan closing between the two of them. Nothing more. Maybe, but look at the sequence the timing creates. May 2025, the power of attorney is signed. Sometime before January 31st, Annie reportedly asks Nancy for a loan and is turned down. January 31st, Nancy has dinner at Annie and Tommaso's house. Tommaso drives her home. February 1st, Nancy is gone. You can explain away any single item in that sequence, but the sequence itself has a direction, and that direction is financial. Now look at what's been happening at Nancy's property, because this is generating questions that no one in the family has answered. Photographs surfaced in recent weeks showing people at Nancy's home loading items into vehicles. Annie's Honda CR-V was visible. Boxes were being carried out. Nancy has not been declared dead. No death certificate exists. No probate has been initiated. No court has authorized anyone to remove personal property from the home of a woman whose disappearance is still an active criminal investigation. Then a true crime reporter named JLR Investigates, who has been covering this case on the ground, posted a simple question. Someone plans to move into Nancy Guthrie's home. Who could it be? The response that took off was just as direct. Someone who can't pay their own property taxes. There's no confirmation that Annie and Tommaso are planning to move in. But between the boxes, the repeated presence of Annie's vehicle, and the fact that Tommaso was already seen moving through the home and garage with visible ease on the same day ransom notes hit TMZ, the public has connected its own dots. The picture those dots form is a family positioning itself to take control of a property that doesn't legally belong to them yet, because its owner hasn't been declared dead. Let me connect the financial thread to something I've covered before but never from this angle: the vulnerability. I've talked about all the protections that were missing from Nancy's life before she was taken. The dog that had died, the security cameras that weren't recording, the hearing aids that came out every night, the medication sitting out, no caregiver, no alarm, no medical alert device. But here's what I haven't said until now. Every single one of those missing protections is cheap to fix. A camera subscription runs about $15 a month. A medical alert pendant costs less than $1 a day. Overnight in-home care through a home health agency in Tucson is available for a few $100s a week. These aren't extraordinary expenses. They're the baseline precautions that families put in place when an elderly parent is living alone. A single phone call and a credit card. The Guthrie family had the resources. Savannah is among the highest-paid broadcast journalists working today. Combined across 3 siblings, there's more than enough to cover every one of those safeguards with change left over. None of it was done. Nancy was left in a $1 million home with no security system, no monitoring, no overnight help, and no way to call for assistance once her hearing aids came out each night. If Annie was in a position where she needed to ask her 84-year-old mother for money and was told no, then the question of why no one invested in basic protection for Nancy takes on a very different weight. It stops being an oversight. It becomes a situation that someone under financial pressure may not have seen as worth prioritizing. And this is the harder version. It becomes something that was allowed to continue because an elderly, unmonitored woman alone in a $1 million home is far easier to reach than one with cameras, alarms, and a caregiver in the next room. I'm not stating that as fact. I'm laying out the logic that the financial evidence points toward, the same logic investigators use when they see that combination of circumstances. Let's walk through the night of January 31st one more time, but through the lens of money and access, not just timelines and cameras. At 5:32 p.m., Nancy called an Uber from her home. The driver picked her up and took her to Annie and Tommaso's for dinner and games. That trip is fully documented, timestamps, in-car footage, a driver who cooperated with the FBI. The ride home is a different story. Nancy didn't take an Uber back, Tommaso drove her. He decided when they left, he chose the route. He controlled the moment Nancy arrived at her front door. His account of what happened when they got there, walking her in, watching the garage close behind her, stands completely alone. No camera recorded the arrival, no neighbor witnessed it, no app generated a timestamp. If the loan refusal is real, if Annie asked her mother for money in the days or weeks before that dinner and Nancy said no, then that evening carries a weight that goes well beyond a family gathering. It means the last person Nancy had dinner with is the daughter who was refused. It means the last person to drive her home is the husband of the woman who was refused. And it means the 14 hours that followed from roughly 9:50 p.m. to noon the next day, during which no one from that household called, texted, or drove 4 miles to check on her, happened in the aftermath of that refusal. 14 hours, that's not a small gap. Nancy was 84, she had a pacemaker, she needed medication at 10 o'clock that the sheriff said could be life-threatening to miss. She was about to become completely deaf to the world around her. She was alone in a house with no working cameras, no alarm, and no one sleeping nearby. The people who drove her home knew all of this. And from the moment the garage closed until a friend noticed an empty chair on a Sunday morning church livestream, there was nothing, no contact whatsoever. In families where an elderly parent lives alone, the goodnight call is reflexive. A 3-second text, "Home safe, love you," exists because people care. That habit was gone the night of January 31st, and its absence created the exact window that whoever took Nancy needed. No unexpected visit, no phone call, no interruption. Just a clean 14-hour block where the only mechanism for discovering something had gone wrong was a friend who noticed an empty chair. The financial lens doesn't change the facts of the timeline. It changes what the timeline might mean. A daughter who doesn't call her mother the night she dropped her off looks different when that daughter had recently been told no. It stops looking like forgetfulness. It starts looking like distance, either the kind that exists between two people after a hard conversation that hasn't resolved, or the kind that serves a different purpose entirely. Now the 911 call. This is where the investigation tells you more by what it's withholding than by what it's released. The call Annie made to report her mother missing has never been made public. Not the audio, not a transcript, not even a summary of what was said. In Arizona, 911 recordings are public records. Reporters can file for them. In high-profile missing persons cases, they typically surface within days. 3 months into this investigation, no one has heard what Annie said when she picked up the phone. Retired Detective Bob Gilliam, appearing on a public interview program, spoke to this directly. He said the recording almost certainly contains investigative details law enforcement doesn't want disclosed yet. He said not to expect it anytime soon. And then he said something that carries more weight than anything else. He suggested the recording might not surface until a trial date approaches. A trial, that word implies charges, an arrest, a case heading toward a courtroom, and the 911 call is being held as evidence for those proceedings. Think about what might be on that recording that would justify sealing it. The obvious elements: Annie's voice, the time of the call, the words she chose, but also the less obvious ones. How much did she volunteer before the dispatcher asked? Did she describe what she found inside? Did she mention blood? Did she mention open doors? Did she say anything that someone seeing the scene for the first time wouldn't yet know? And there's the 7-minute gap in the published timeline. The family arrived at Nancy's home at 11:56. The 911 call was placed at 12:03, 7 minutes between approaching the home of a missing 84-year-old woman and calling for help. If there was visible blood on the front steps from the moment they arrived, which accounts suggest there was 6 of those minutes passed between seeing evidence of a crime and reporting it. What filled those 6 minutes? A search of the house, phone calls between family members, a conversation about what to say, something touched that shouldn't have been. The 911 recording likely answers that. Background noise, other voices, the emotional state of the caller in those first unguarded moments, all of it locked away because investigators decided the public isn't ready to hear it. There's still an open debate about how many people were physically involved in removing Nancy from the house. Retired Detective Gilliam believes it required at least 2. The logistics of moving someone with limited mobility through a home, past a security gate, and into a vehicle at 2 in the morning without waking anyone are too complex for one person working alone. Former FBI agent Jim Clement disagrees. Based on the blood pattern found on the front steps, he assessed a single suspect as more likely, reasoning that a second person would have prevented Nancy from ending up outside on the ground. C.C. Moore's DNA assessment, Nancy plus 2 or more unknown contributors, may eventually settle this. If the hair samples and surface material identify multiple people, Gilliam's theory gains forensic backing. If they point to one, Clement holds. Either way, that answer is in a laboratory right now, and the people waiting most anxiously for it may not be the ones the public expects. As for where the investigation stands, the silence from official channels is itself a message. The sheriff hasn't held a substantive press conference in over a month. On the 3-month mark, May 1st, he appeared in a short clip saying he believes someone out there knows what happened. That's the kind of statement made by a department that either has nothing left to give or is sitting on something it can't reveal yet. NBC built a protocol specifically for this case. If news breaks during a live broadcast, Savannah is pulled from the set. A different anchor handles the story on air. The information is given to Savannah privately. That protocol was used on April 15th. She was removed mid-broadcast after teasing a segment. She returned later without explanation. 2 days after that, she was absent from the program entirely. Networks don't build those procedures for cases going cold. They build them for cases where they expect a moment, an arrest, a body, an identification that will hit the family in real time on national television. The protocol is preparation. Brian Anton told Parade on May 3rd that cooperation between the sheriff's office and the FBI has improved. But Pima County Board of Supervisors Vice Chair Dr. Matthew Hines publicly accused the sheriff of interfering with that federal cooperation because of a personal conflict with the Bureau. A sitting county official said the sheriff let personal feelings get in the way of a federal investigation into the abduction of an 84-year-old woman. That accusation has not been retracted. Ed Smart, Elizabeth Smart's father, chose his words deliberately in a News Nation appearance. He said the Guthries have supposedly been cleared. Supposedly. That's a word you reach for when you're respecting the official position while keeping the door open to the possibility that it's wrong. The DNA is with the FBI. The hair sample, the one the sheriff's initial team missed and federal agents recovered on a return visit, is being processed and may be going through Astrea Forensics, the San Francisco lab that helped convict Rex Heuermann in the Long Island serial killer case. A CODIS search already came back clean. Whoever left biological material inside Nancy's home has no prior criminal record, no arrests, no convictions, someone living an ordinary life. Someone whose name wouldn't raise any flags, someone who might attend family dinners, drive elderly women home, sign powers of attorney, and ask for loans that get turned down. 3 months, no arrest, no named suspect. A mother who reportedly said no to her daughter's request for money and then disappeared from $1 million home. A daughter whose car was seized and held for 40 days of forensic examination. 40 days isn't standard processing for someone who has been publicly cleared. That's the timeline of a vehicle being examined for specific biological or physical evidence. A son-in-law who controlled the last undocumented ride home. A power of attorney signed 8 months before the disappearance. Property being removed from a home whose owner has not been declared dead. A 911 call sealed by investigators with a retired detective saying it won't surface until the case reaches a courtroom. DNA from multiple unidentified people with clean records. An investigation that has gone quiet the way investigations go quiet when something is being assembled behind closed doors. Every video before this one showed you how Nancy Guthrie was taken. This one shows you why someone would go through all of it. And the answer starts with a conversation between a mother and her daughter about money. Let me put the financial thread together one final time beginning to end, because when you see it assembled as a single sequence, it becomes very hard to look away. May 2025, a durable power of attorney is signed, placing Annie in control of Tommaso's financial and property matters. Legal experts say it's routine for real estate transactions. The timing puts it 8 months before the abduction. Sometime before January 31st, Annie reportedly asks Nancy for a loan. The amount is unknown. The reason is unknown. Nancy says no. If verified, this is the first documented moment of financial tension between the mother and the daughter who would be the last person to see her. January 31st, 5:32 p.m., Nancy takes a documented Uber to Annie and Tommaso's home for dinner. January 31st, approximately 9:50 p.m., Tommaso drives Nancy home, undocumented, no third-party camera, no rideshare log, no independent witness, his account alone. 9:50 p.m. to 12:03 p.m. the following day, 14 hours and 13 minutes of total silence. No call, no text, no visit from the people who live 4 miles away and spent the evening with a woman they knew would be alone, deaf, and dependent on medication. February 1st, 1:47 a.m., a doorbell camera captures a masked suspect on the porch. February 1st, 2:28 a.m., Nancy's pacemaker disconnects from her phone. She has been moved beyond Bluetooth range of the nightstand. February 1st, 12:03 p.m., Annie places the 911 call, currently sealed by investigators. A retired detective says it likely contains evidence being held for trial. February through March, Annie's Honda CR-V is seized and held for over 40 days of what has been described as exhaustive forensic analysis. April, photographs surface showing people removing items from Nancy's home. Annie's vehicle is present, no death certificate, no probate, no court authorization. May, speculation emerges publicly that someone intends to move into Nancy's home. The response that circulated fastest: someone who can't afford their own property taxes. That is the thread, and it runs through every phase of this case, from the power of attorney to the loan refusal, to the last dinner, to the undocumented ride home, to the 14-hour silence, to the sealed 911 call, to the vehicle held for 40 days, to the property being cleared while its owner remains missing. Every item in that sequence has an innocent explanation. I've said that throughout this video. A power of attorney can be routine, a dinner can be just a dinner, a ride home can be a courtesy, a gap in phone calls can be an oversight, boxes can be moved for preservation purposes. But here is what 3 months of following this case has taught me. When every innocent explanation requires you to ignore what came before it and what comes after it, when accepting each one in isolation means pretending the sequence doesn't exist, the innocent explanations stop being the most likely ones. They become the ones you have to work hardest to believe. I am not accusing Annie Guthrie or Tommaso Cioni of anything. I have never made that accusation on this channel. What I have done in every video is follow the evidence. And the evidence has now led to a financial trail that begins with a daughter asking her mother for money, and ends with boxes leaving $1 million home before the law has declared its owner dead. The answer may be sitting inside a conversation that ended with a mother saying no. A conversation that this investigation may eventually prove was the last meaningful exchange between them. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and leave a comment telling me what you think is on that 911 call, because a retired detective believes it won't be released until a trial date is set.